The town of Willow Creek sat like a festering wound between the endless prairie and the dark pine forests of the Colorado Territory. In the autumn of 1876, when the aspens turned gold and the first frost kissed the ground, folks had little to talk about except the widow who lived at the edge of the woods. Eliza Hartley kept to herself in a cabin her late husband had built with his own hands. The townsfolk called her many things when they thought she couldn't hear: witch, curse-bringer, devil's bride. She was 24 years old, though grief had etched fine lines around her green eyes that made her seem older. Her auburn hair, which she wore in a simple braid, caught the light like copper when she ventured into town for supplies. The cabin stood a mile from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by wild herbs and mountain flowers she cultivated with careful hands. Smoke curled from the chimney this October morning as Eliza ground willow bark in her mortar, preparing a tincture for old Martha Coleman's arthritis. The work kept her hands busy and her mind from wandering to memories she'd rather forget. A knock at her door made her pause. Visitors were rare and rarely brought good news. "Mrs. Hartley?" A small voice called through the wood. "It's me, Samuel." She recognized the boy, Martha's grandson, all of 8 years old with a gap where his front teeth should be. Opening the door, she found him shifting from foot to foot, clutching a basket. "Grandma sends payment," he said, thrusting the basket forward. Inside were fresh eggs and a loaf of bread. "And she says to tell you the medicine's working real good." Eliza smiled, the expression feeling foreign on her face. "Tell her I'm glad to hear it." The boy lingered, eyes darting to the dried herbs hanging from her rafters. "Is it true what they say, that you learned magic from the Indians?" "I learned medicine," she corrected gently. "From books and from anyone willing to teach. Nothing magic about willow bark for pain or chamomile for sleep." Samuel nodded, but she could see he wasn't convinced. The stories were already taking root in his young mind. After he left, she stood in the doorway watching his small figure disappear into the tree line. Knowing he'd run all the way back to town, the morning stretched on in solitude. She tended her garden, though most plants had already surrendered to autumn's grip. The remaining herbs, sage, rosemary, and thyme, clung stubbornly to life under her careful protection. A fox watched her from the forest edge, its red coat nearly matching her hair. She tossed it scraps from last night's meal, and it grabbed them before melting back into the shadows. By afternoon, she needed supplies. The walk to town took 30 minutes if she hurried, but she never hurried anymore. What was the point? The general store would still be there, and so would the whispers. Willow Creek's main street was rutted from wagon wheels and spotted with horse droppings. False-fronted buildings lined both sides: the saloon, the church, the bank, and Morrison's general store. She kept her eyes forward, her back straight, ignoring the way conversations died as she passed. Inside Morrison's, the familiar scent of pickle brine and coffee beans enveloped her. Mr. Morrison, a thin man with pomaded hair, watched her from behind the counter. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "What can I get you?" She handed him her list: flour, salt, thread, lamp oil, nothing unusual. As he gathered the items, she heard the bell above the door chime. 3 women entered, wives of prominent townsmen. Mrs. Wallace, the banker's wife, led them. "Well, Mrs. Wallace said, her voice carrying deliberately, "I suppose anyone can shop here." Eliza kept her attention on a bolt of fabric, running her fingers over the blue cotton. She'd need a new dress soon. Her current ones were wearing thin. "Did you hear about the Brennan family?" Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, asked her companions. "All 3 children took ill last week, burning with fever." "Strange how sickness follows some people," Mrs. Wallace replied, her eyes fixed on Eliza's back. "Mr. Morrison cleared his throat. "Your order's ready, Mrs. Hartley." She paid without meeting his eyes, gathered her purchases, and headed for the door. As she reached for the handle, Mrs. Wallace stepped into her path. "You knew my brother-in-law," the woman said. "Reverend Hartley was a good man, a godly man." Eliza met her gaze steadily. "Yes, he was. Until he married you." Mrs. Wallace's eyes glittered with righteous anger. 6 months later, dead from fever, just 25 years old. "Fevers take many people," Eliza said quietly. "Young and old, good and bad, but they seem to take those near you more than most." The other women murmured agreement. Eliza stepped around Mrs. Wallace and pushed through the door, their whispers following her into the street. The walk home seemed longer. Heavy clouds gathered over the mountains, promising rain or early snow. She thought of John, her late husband, and how different her life had become from what she'd imagined as a bride. He'd been handsome in his black preacher's coat, with gentle hands and a voice that could make scripture sound like poetry. She'd been 18, eager to escape her father's farm, eager to be a minister's wife in a growing town. But marriage had taught her that gentle hands could still leave bruises where they wouldn't show, and that beautiful words could cut deeper than ugly ones. The fever that took him had been swift and merciless. She'd nursed him for 3 days, watching delirium claim his mind, listening to him call out for God and his mother, but never for her. When he died, she'd felt grief, yes, but also a shameful relief that made her wonder what kind of monster she truly was. Thunder rumbled as she reached her cabin. The fox was back, sitting by her door like a sentry. It fled as she approached, and she noticed fresh scratches in the wood of her doorframe. Her blood chilled. Someone had been here while she was gone. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, but the feeling persisted. On her table, she found what they'd left, a crude drawing of a woman burning, with "witch" scrawled beneath it. She crumpled the paper and fed it to her stove, hands trembling not with fear but with anger. Let them call her witch. Let them blame her for their troubles. She'd survived worse than their hatred. That night, the storm broke with violent purpose. Rain lashed against her windows as she worked by lamplight, preparing medicines she hoped would be needed, trying not to think about the families who would suffer rather than accept her help. The fox had taken shelter under her porch. She could hear it scratching and settling. Near midnight, above the storm's fury, came another sound: horses, multiple riders, moving fast despite the weather. They passed by her cabin without stopping, heading deeper into the forest, but their presence sent a warning through her bones. The territory was changing. The Apache Wars had ended. Soldiers were mustering out, and men with no purpose often found trouble, or made it. She banked her fire and prepared for bed, checking the load in John's old rifle before setting it by the door. Outside, lightning illuminated the forest in stark moments, revealing and concealing the wilderness that pressed close around her small sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, she would sleep with one ear open and her hands ready to heal or defend as needed. It was a hard life, but it was hers now, and she would not let fear or loneliness drive her from it. In the darkness, she whispered a prayer, not one John would have recognized, but older words learned from a Mexican curandera who treated her kindly when others turned away. Words for protection, for strength, for the courage to face another day in a world that named her witch and cast her out. The storm raged on, but eventually, sleep took her, and in her dreams, she ran free through the forest, her feet bare and her hair unbound, wild as the fox that guarded her door. The morning after the storm dawned crisp and clear, with frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. Eliza was gathering kindling when she heard the horse, labored breathing and uneven hoofbeats approaching through the trees. She straightened, shading her eyes against the early sun. The rider emerged from the forest edge, slumped forward in his saddle. His horse, a paint mare with wild eyes, limped badly. Blood stained the saddle leather. Eliza dropped her kindling and ran forward as the man swayed and fell, hitting the ground hard. The horse shied away, favoring its left foreleg. She knelt beside the fallen rider, her healer's instincts overriding caution. He was native, though dressed in Army Scout clothing, blue wool jacket, canvas pants, worn boots. Comanche. She guessed from his features and the style of beadwork on his knife sheath. Blood seeped from a gash along his ribs where something had torn through jacket and shirt. Not a bullet wound, more like he'd been dragged across rocks. His eyes opened as she examined the wound, dark and sharp, with pain, but also wariness. His hand moved toward the knife at his belt. "Be still," she said firmly. "I'm going to help you." He studied her face, then let his hand fall. "Horse," he said, voice rough. "Help her first." The request surprised her, but she understood. She approached the mare slowly, speaking soft nonsense words. The animal's left foreleg was swollen above the hoof, strained, not broken. Relief flooded through her. "Your horse will heal," she told the man. "Now let me tend to you before you bleed to death in my yard." Between them, they managed to get him inside, him leaning heavily on her shoulder, trying not to show how much each step cost him. She settled him on the cot she kept for patients, then set about gathering what she needed: clean water, whiskey for cleansing, needle and thread, bandages torn from clean linen. "This will hurt," she warned, pouring whiskey over the wound. His jaw tightened, but he made no sound. She worked quickly, cleaning away blood and dirt to reveal 3 deep gashes across his ribs. They looked like claw marks, though what animal would leave such wounds she couldn't guess. "Bear?" she asked, threading her needle. "Horse spooked." "Went down in the ravine." His English was careful, accented but clear. "Dragged me across the rocks." She nodded, beginning to stitch. He remained still as stone, though sweat beaded on his forehead. When she finished, she applied a poultice of comfrey and calendula, then wrapped his ribs with clean bandages. "Thomas Redhawk," he said as she worked. "Scout for Fort Lyon." "Eliza Hartley." She helped him sit up enough to drink water mixed with willow bark for pain. "What were you doing in the ravine?" His expression darkened. "Tracking." She didn't press. "In the territory." Some questions were better left unasked. Instead, she prepared a simple meal: broth, bread, dried apples. He ate slowly, watching her move about the cabin. "You live alone," he observed. Not a question. "My husband died 2 years ago." "I'm sorry." She shrugged, uncomfortable with sympathy. "The mare needs tending. I'll make a poultice for her leg." Outside, she found the horse had discovered her small haystack. The animal stood 3-legged, munching contentedly. Eliza mixed a drawing poultice and wrapped the swollen leg, marveling at how the mare stood patient for a stranger's touch. When she returned, Thomas had risen despite her orders to rest. He stood by her bookshelf, examining her medical texts. "You read Latin," he said, touching a worn spine. "My father believed in education, even for daughters." She guided him back to the cot. "You need rest." "I need to report back." "Not today. That wound needs at least 3 days before you sit a horse." His face showed frustration, but he didn't argue. She sensed he was a man who chose his battles carefully. Evening fell soft and golden. She prepared supper: venison stew from meat she'd smoked last week, cornbread, and wild greens. They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. She found herself stealing glances at him, noting the silver threads in his black hair, the old scar across his left eyebrow, the way he held himself even wounded. Alert, ready. "You're not afraid," he said suddenly. "Most white women would be." "Should I be?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "No." She cleared the dishes, aware of his eyes following her movements. It had been so long since she'd had company that didn't want something from her: healing, help, or someone to blame. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "This place, alone. It's dangerous." She considered her answer. "Where would I go? I have no family left, no money beyond what my herbs and medicines bring, and—" She hesitated. "The town already believes I'm cursed. At least here, I can be useful." "Cursed. My husband died of fever. Some say I brought it on him, that I learned dark magic from—" She paused, glancing at him. "From Indians." He snorted. "White people love their demons." The simple truth of it made her laugh, surprising them both. "Yes, I suppose they do." Night deepened. She gave him more willow bark tea and checked his bandages. The wound looked clean, already beginning to heal. He had the constitution of a man who'd survived much. "I'll sleep by the fire," she said, gathering blankets. "No." He started to rise. "I won't take your bed. You're injured. Don't be foolish." They regarded each other in the lamplight. Two stubborn souls. Finally. He settled back with a grimace that might have been amusement. She made her pallet by the hearth, tired but strangely content. The fox scratched at the door, and she let it in. The creature regarded Thomas with suspicion before curling up near Eliza's feet. "You have unusual friends," Thomas observed. "Outcasts find each other. In the darkness." She heard him shift on the cot. "I know about being outcast." She waited, but he offered nothing more. Eventually, his breathing deepened into sleep. She lay awake longer, listening to the night sounds, owl calls, wind in the pines, the fox's gentle snoring. For the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel alone. Morning brought complications. She woke to find Thomas already up, moving stiffly but determinedly around the cabin. "You're going to tear those stitches," she warned. "I've had worse." But he accepted her help rewrapping the bandages, sitting still as she worked. His proximity unsettled her, the warm scent of his skin, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied off the linen. "There's something else," he said quietly. "The men I was tracking. They're army deserters, killed a family near Pueblo, stole horses and supplies. They were heading this direction." Fear traced cold fingers down her spine. "How many? 4, maybe 5. He caught her hand as she pulled away. "I won't leave you undefended. You can barely stand. I can shoot." The day passed in uneasy vigilance. Thomas stationed himself by the window despite her protests, rifle across his knees. She went about her usual tasks, grinding herbs, preparing tinctures, tending the mare. But tension hung thick in the air. Late afternoon brought visitors, though not the ones they feared. Samuel appeared again, this time accompanied by his grandmother. Martha Coleman walked slowly, leaning on a carved stick. Her weathered face creased with worry. "Mrs. Hartley," she said, then stopped. Seeing Thomas by the window, her eyes widened. "This is Mr. Redhawk," Eliza said calmly. "He was injured and needed help." Martha's gaze darted between them. I see." She pulled Samuel closer. "We shouldn't have come. Please." Eliza stepped forward. "What's wrong?" The old woman hesitated. "It's the Brennan children. The fever's worse. Mrs. Brennan wants—" She swallowed. "She sent me to ask for your help." "After all they've said?" Martha's face crumpled. "I know, but children are dying. Mrs. Hartley." 3 other families, too. Doctor Morrison can't help them. He's saying it might be cholera." Eliza was already reaching for her medicine bag. "Not cholera. I'll need to see them." "Eliza." Thomas's voice held warning. "It's not safe." She met his eyes. "Children are sick." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." The argument was brief and futile. In the end, all 4 of them made the journey to town, Eliza and Martha in her small cart, Thomas riding his mare despite the pain it clearly caused him, and Samuel perched beside his grandmother. Word of their approach spread quickly. By the time they reached the Brennan house, a crowd had gathered. Some faces showed hope, others suspicion, and a few outright hostility. "Get back, witch!" someone shouted. A stone flew, striking the cartwheel. Thomas moved his horse between Eliza and the crowd, his hand resting meaningfully on his rifle stock. The mass of people shifted uneasily. An armed Indian scout, even a wounded one, commanded respect born of fear. Mrs. Brennan appeared in her doorway, face ravaged by sleepless nights and terror. "Please," she said simply, and Eliza forgot the crowd, forgot everything but the mother's desperate eyes. Inside, the smell of sickness hung heavy. 3 children lay on pallets, the oldest perhaps 10, the youngest barely 4. Eliza examined them quickly, efficiently, noting the symptoms: Not cholera, thank God, but serious enough. Lung fever, she diagnosed. I can help, but I need complete quiet and cooperation. For the next hours, she worked, preparing herbal steam treatments, mixing tinctures, showing Mrs. Brennan how to position the children to help them breathe. Thomas remained by the door, a silent guardian, while the crowd outside grew and muttered. By nightfall, the youngest child's fever had broken. The other two showed improvement. Mrs. Brennan wept with relief, clutching Eliza's hands. "Forgive me," she whispered. "The things we said help the others believe." Eliza replied, "That's all the payment I need." They left as darkness fell, Thomas riding close to the cart. The crowd had dispersed, but Eliza felt eyes watching from windows and doorways. Change might come, but slowly, and trust once broken was hard to repair. Back at her cabin, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Thomas helped her from the cart, his own fatigue evident in the tight lines around his mouth. "You did a good thing," he said softly. "I did what I could." She leaned into his support for just a moment, allowing herself that small weakness. "Will you stay?" The question hung between them, meaning more than just one night's shelter. He touched her face gently, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "As long as you'll have me," he answered, and in his dark eyes, she saw her own loneliness reflected and, perhaps, the promise of its end. The knock came at dawn, urgent and frightened. Eliza opened the door to find Samuel, tears streaming down his face, his small chest heaving from running. "They're coming," he gasped. "Tonight, Pa heard them talking at the saloon. They say you made those children sick so you could cure them. Say you're working with the devil." Thomas appeared behind her, fully dressed despite the early hour. He'd been preparing to leave for Fort Lyon. His wound healed enough for travel. Now his face hardened. "How many?" he asked the boy. 15, maybe 20. Mr. Wallace is leading them. They got torches ready and—" Samuel's voice broke. "They're gonna burn the cabin, with you in it." Eliza's knees nearly buckled, but Thomas's hand on her elbow kept her standing. She knelt before Samuel, taking his small hands in hers. "Thank you for warning me. Now run home. Tell no one you came here." After the boy disappeared into the forest, she turned to find Thomas already packing. He moved with grim efficiency, selecting only essentials: food, ammunition, her medicine bag. "No," she said. "This is my home. This is your death if you stay." He paused in his packing to face her. "They won't listen to reason. Not a mob like that. Where would I go?" "With me." The simple words hung between them. In the week since his arrival, something had grown between them, unspoken but undeniable. His presence had become as natural as breathing, their silences comfortable, their conversations ranging from medicine to philosophy to the small details of daily survival. "Thomas, there's no time for arguments." He pressed her father's old pistol into her hands. "Pack what you can't bear to lose. We leave within the hour." She packed mechanically. Medical texts, herbs, a photograph of her mother, the few coins hidden beneath loose floorboards, her wedding ring she left on the table. That life was dead. Let it remain buried. As she worked, Thomas scouted outside, returning with troubling news. Fresh tracks. 3 riders were here during the night, watching. The deserters? Maybe. Or Wallace sent scouts. He secured her bags to his mare. "Either way, we can't take the main trails." They left as the sun climbed higher. Eliza on her old mule, Thomas leading on foot to spare his horse. The fox followed for a while before melting back into the forest. She didn't look back at the cabin, couldn't bear to see what she was losing. Thomas led them deep into the woods, following game trails invisible to her eyes. Pine needles muffled their passage, but every snapping twig made her heart race. By afternoon, they reached a narrow canyon she'd never seen before. "Rest here," he said, helping her dismount. "I need to check our back trail." He vanished into the rocks like smoke. She sat by a thin stream, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Everything had happened so fast. Yesterday she'd been a healer with a home, however unwelcome in town. Now she was a fugitive, fleeing with a man she barely knew yet trusted completely. A branch cracked behind her. She spun, reaching for the pistol, then froze. 3 men emerged from the trees, rough, dirty, wearing remnants of army uniforms. Deserters. Well, the largest one drawled, "What have we here?" She stood slowly, hand still near the gun. "I'm no threat to you. Pretty woman alone in the woods?" Another man circled to her left. "Could be profitable, could be fun. I'm not alone." The leader laughed. "That Injun scout? We saw him heading up canyon, won't be back for a while." They closed in, and she knew with cold certainty that running would only trigger their predator instincts. Her fingers closed on the pistol grip. "Don't be foolish, woman." The leader stepped closer. "We already killed one family that fought back. But cooperate, and maybe—" The arrow sprouted from his throat before he could finish. He dropped, gurgling, as his companion spun wildly, searching for the threat. A second arrow took one in the chest. The third man fired blindly into the rocks before Thomas materialized behind him, knife flashing. It was over in seconds. 3 dead men cooling in the dirt, and Thomas standing among them like death itself, blood on his blade. Eliza's hands shook as he approached. "You came back. I never left." He cleaned his knife calmly, circled behind when I saw their tracks converging. She wanted to be horrified by the violence, but all she felt was relief and a fierce gratitude. They were the ones who killed that family, among other things. He searched the bodies efficiently, recovering ammunition and supplies. "This changes things. Wallace's mob will find these bodies, assume we killed them. We did. You did. To them. It'll be proof of your witchcraft. An Indian and a witch murdering white men?" His face was grim. "They'll bring the whole county down on us." They pushed harder after that, climbing higher into the mountains as afternoon waned. The terrain grew treacherous, loose rocks, steep switchbacks, paths barely wide enough for the animals. Eliza's mule stumbled, nearly sending her over a cliff before Thomas caught the reins. "We need shelter," he decided as storm clouds gathered. "I know a place." The cave was hidden behind a fall of rocks, invisible until you were almost inside. "Kiowa sacred ground," Thomas explained as they led the animals in. The walls bore faded paintings, hunters and buffalo, stars and spirals. "Will your people mind?" she asked. "I have no people." The words were flat, matter of fact. Not anymore. They built a small fire near the entrance, smoke dispersing through cracks in the roof. Outside, rain began, then sleet, then snow. October in the high country could turn deadly fast. Eliza prepared a simple meal from their supplies while Thomas tended the animals. The cave felt ancient, protective, as if countless others had sheltered here from storms both natural and man-made. "Tell me," she said as they ate, "about having no people." He stared into the fire for long moments. "My mother was Comanche, died when I was 12. My father was a trader, white. He took me to Fort Lyon, said the army would make me useful." His smile held no humor. "They made me very useful, tracking my mother's people, leading soldiers to camps. You had no choice. There's always a choice. I chose to survive." He met her eyes. "After 10 years, I couldn't stomach it anymore. Couldn't be white. Couldn't go back to being Comanche, so I exist between worlds." "Like me," she said softly. "Too strange for town life, too proper for the wilderness. Yet here we are." The firelight danced between them. She became acutely aware of their isolation, the intimacy of the small space. When he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, she didn't pull away. "Eliza." Her name on his lips was a question and a promise. She answered by leaning into his touch. His kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. The loneliness of 2 years, the fear of the day, the uncertain future, all fell away. There was only this moment, this connection. They made a bed of blankets near the fire. His hands were reverent as they undressed each other, tracing scars and stories on each other's skin. When they came together, it was with a desperate tenderness, as if they could hold back the hostile world through sheer will. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the storm outside. His fingers combed through her unbound hair. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "We keep moving, south maybe, toward New Mexico, places where mixed couples draw less attention. Is that what we are? A couple?" He turned her face toward his. "What do you want us to be?" "Alive," she said fiercely. "Together and alive." He kissed her again, sealing the promise. They woke to voices. Thomas was instantly alert, hand on his rifle. The voices grew closer. Many men, horses, dogs. "The tracks lead this way. Check every cave." Wallace's mob had found them. Thomas pulled Eliza deeper into the cave. "There's another exit, narrow but passable. The animals have to leave them." He pressed her bag into her hands. "Go. I'll delay them." "No!" She gripped his arm. "Together or not at all." His eyes softened for an instant. "Stubborn woman." They slipped through the back passage as the voices reached the cave mouth. The space was barely wide enough for bodies, scraping skin and catching clothes. Behind them, shouts of discovery. They'd found the warm fire ashes. The passage opened onto a ledge barely 2 feet wide, with a sheer drop into morning mist. They pressed against the cliff face. Inching along, Eliza didn't look down, focused only on Thomas's steady presence ahead. Gunshots echoed from the cave. The mob had found their gear, knew they were close. Thomas moved faster, pulling her around a corner onto safer ground. "Run!" he commanded. They fled through the forest, branches tearing at clothes and skin. Behind them, the baying of dogs grew louder. The mob had picked up their trail. A rider burst from the trees ahead, one of Wallace's men, rifle raised. Thomas's knife flew before the man could fire. Taking him in the shoulder, he fell from his horse, screaming. "Take the horse!" Thomas boosted Eliza into the saddle, swinging up behind her. They galloped through the trees, low branches whipping past. More riders appeared, firing wildly. Thomas guided the horse with his knees, returning fire with deadly accuracy. 2 men fell, but more kept coming. The horse screamed, stumbling as a bullet found its flank. They tumbled into a ravine, rolling down loose scree. Eliza struck her head on a rock, stars exploding across her vision. Strong hands pulled her behind a boulder as bullets sparked off stone. Thomas was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, but his eyes remained focused. "How many rounds?" she asked. "Not enough." He checked his rifle. "But enough to make them pay." She gripped the pistol he'd given her. "Together?" "Together." The mob approached cautiously, knowing they had their quarry cornered. Wallace's voice rang out. "Surrender the witch! We might let you live! Indian!" Thomas's answer was a shot that sent Wallace diving for cover. The mob opened fire, lead flying like angry hornets. They returned fire sparingly, making each shot count. Then, sudden silence. Eliza heard horses, many horses, approaching fast, not from the mob's direction, from the north. Blue uniforms appeared through the trees. Cavalry from Fort Lyon. A captain rode forward, taking in the scene. "Thomas Redhawk, stand down!" Thomas lowered his rifle slowly. "Captain Morrison." The officer surveyed the dead men, the mob now looking uncertain. "We found 3 bodies by a cabin, deserters we've been hunting. Your trail led us here." His eyes found Wallace. "Armed civilians pursuing an army scout appears mighty like insurrection." Wallace sputtered. "That woman's a witch. She is a healer who saved the Brennan children." Captain Morrison cut him off. "Yes, we heard. Also heard you were planning to burn her out." He smiled coldly. "Attempted murder. Mr. Wallace. Federal matter now." The mob dispersed quickly under military guns. Wallace and 3 others were arrested. The captain turned to Thomas and Eliza. "The deserters?" "Self-defense," Thomas said simply. Morrison nodded. "Figured as much. You coming back to the fort?" Thomas looked at Eliza, a question in his eyes. She took his hand. Decision made. We're heading south. Thomas said, New Mexico, maybe. The captain studied them, the Indian scout and the witch woman. Hands clasped, blood-stained but unbroken. Never saw you, he decided. Red Hawk died pursuing deserters. Very heroic. He left them 2 horses and supplies, as the cavalry departed with their prisoners. Thomas touched Eliza's face gently. You're sure? She thought of her cabin, probably ashes now, of the town that had rejected her, the life that had never truly fit. Then she looked at this man who'd killed for her, who offered a future uncertain but shared. I'm sure. They rode south as the morning sun climbed higher, leaving the mountains and memories behind. Somewhere ahead lay new territories, new possibilities. The witch and the scout, writing their own story in a land vast enough to hold even outlaws and lovers. Together, alive, free. The high plains stretched endlessly before them, red earth and stubborn sage beneath an unforgiving sun. They'd been riding south for 5 days, following old trading routes Thomas remembered from his scouting years. The mountains had given way to mesas and canyon country, beautiful in its harsh austerity. Eliza had never seen such vast emptiness. After the close forests around Willow Creek, the open land felt both liberating and exposed. She rode beside Thomas in companionable silence, learning to read the landscape through his eyes, where to find water, which plants held moisture, how to spot shelter before storms struck. There, Thomas pointed to a line of cottonwoods in the distance. Water, we'll rest the horses. The stream ran thin but clear. Carved deep into red rock, they made camp in the shade, grateful for respite from the October heat that lingered in this lower country. While the horses drank, Eliza refilled their water bags, then noticed Thomas examining the ground with sharp attention. What is it? Tracks, unshod ponies, maybe 6 hours old. He stood, scanning the horizon. Apache, most likely hunting party. Fear prickled along her spine, but his calm steadied her. Are we in danger? Not if we're careful. This is their land. We're just passing through. He met her eyes. But stay close. No fires tonight. They ate cold biscuits and dried meat as the sun set, painting the rocks in shades of copper and purple. Without fire. The night pressed close, brilliant with stars she'd never seen so clearly. Thomas spread their bedrolls close together, rifles within reach. Tell me about this, she said softly, tracing the scar above his eyebrow. Bar fight in Tucson. Soldier didn't like drinking next to a half-breed. His smile was wry. He liked it even less when I broke his nose. She kissed the old wound gently. These moments of tenderness still surprised them both, stolen between watchfulness, precious for their rarity. They made love quietly under the stars, aware of their vulnerability but unable to resist the comfort of connection. Morning brought new challenges. The horses were gone. Lead ropes cut clean, tracks heading southwest. Thomas read the sign with professional detachment. Young warriors, probably watched us all night, waited until near dawn. He shouldered his rifle. They left our packs. That's something. Can we track them? On foot? They have 6 hours lead. He touched her face. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have picketed them closer. Don't. She hefted her pack, lighter now with supplies running low. We walk. The first day on foot was agony. Her boots, made for forest paths, split at the seams on sharp rocks. By noon, blisters had formed and burst. Thomas fashioned wrappings from strips of blanket, but each step still burned. He found a shallow cave as the afternoon heat peaked. While she rested, he disappeared into the landscape, returning with prickly pear pads, their spines carefully removed. For your feet, he explained, splitting them open to reveal moist inner flesh. Old remedy. The cool gel soothed her raw skin. She watched him work, noting how naturally he moved in this hard country. You've been here before, many times, chasing or being chased. He prepared more cactus, storing it in her bag. There's a trading post 2 days south. If we can make it there, we'll make it. That night they sheltered in a box canyon, backs against red stone still warm from the day. Coyotes called in the darkness, answered by others until the night filled with wild song. Thomas had found water, barely a seep from the rocks, but enough. My mother's people believe Coyote is a trickster, he said, arm around her shoulders. Never trust him, but always respect his cleverness. What do you believe? That we need to be clever as coyotes to survive out here. On the second day, they saw dust on the horizon. Thomas pulled her behind an outcropping, watching the riders approach. Not Apache, 3 white men moving fast but sloppy, leaving clear trails. Comancheros, maybe, Thomas murmured. Traders who deal in guns, whiskey, other things. The riders passed within 50 yards, never noticing them pressed against red rock. Eliza held her breath until they vanished into heat shimmer. They walked through the afternoon, Thomas setting a steady pace that 8 miles despite her painful feet. He taught her desert survival, which cacti held water, how to find shade at midday, signs that predicted flash floods. She absorbed it all, determined to be partner rather than burden. Near sunset, they created a rise and saw it, a collection of adobe buildings around a well, smoke rising from chimneys. The trading post. Wait here, Thomas said. Let me scout first. But Eliza grabbed his arm. Together, remember. The trading post was rough even by frontier standards. Adobe walls pocked with bullet holes, a corral holding scraggly horses, and a main building that served as store, saloon, and shelter for travelers. The proprietor, a one-eyed Mexican named Diego, looked them over shrewdly. Room and board, $2. Horses, if I can find them. Extra. Thomas laid coins on the scarred counter. And information? Diego's good eye glinted. That depends on what you seek. Amigo. They took a small room behind the store. Dirt floor, narrow cot, but private. Eliza sank onto the bed, pulling off her ruined boots with a hiss of pain. Thomas knelt, examining her feet with gentle hands. These need proper tending. He looked up at her. I'll find what we need. He returned with a basin of hot water, soap, and, miraculously, a small bottle of carbolic acid. Diego's wife was a curandera. He keeps some supplies. As he bathed her feet, cleaning each blister with careful attention, Eliza felt tears rise, not from pain, but from the tenderness of the gesture. This man who could kill without hesitation handled her damaged feet like precious glass. Why did you really leave Fort Lyon? She asked quietly. It wasn't just conscience. His hands stilled for a moment. No. He resumed his work, voice low. There was a massacre. Peaceful camp. Mostly women and children. I refused to lead the soldiers there. They went anyway. Found it on their own. His jaw tightened. 27 dead, including my cousin's family. Oh, Thomas. They called it a battle. Gave medals to the officers. He wrapped her feet in clean cloth. I couldn't serve them anymore. Couldn't be their tame Indian, tracking my mother's people for slaughter. She pulled him up beside her, holding his face between her hands. You're not tame. You're not theirs. You're... She searched for words. You're Thomas. That's enough. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and they clung together in the fading light. Later, they ventured into the main room for food. The other patrons were a rough mix. Mexican vaqueros, American drifters, a table of men who looked like they robbed stages for a living. Eliza felt their eyes follow her, the only woman visible. They ate quickly. Beans, tortillas, stringy beef, keeping to themselves. But trouble found them anyway. Hey, Scout. One of the Americans, drunk and belligerent, approached their table. That your squaw? Thomas didn't look up. Move on. Asked you a question. Breed. The man's hand dropped to his gun. Maybe I want a buyer. Everything's for sale here. Eliza saw Thomas shift slightly, hand near his knife. But before violence could erupt, Diego appeared with a shotgun. Not in my place. Senor. You want to kill each other. Go outside. The drunk backed off, muttering, but his eyes promised future trouble. They returned to their room, barricading the door. Through thin walls came sounds of revelry, arguments, a woman's laughter that held no joy. We leave before dawn. Thomas decided, Diego says there's a ranch 40 miles south. They might have horses to trade. Can we trust him? No, but we have few options. He checked his weapons methodically. Try to sleep. I'll keep watch. But sleep eluded her. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and menace. Near midnight, footsteps approached their door. The handle rattled. Thomas was already moving, rifle trained on the entry. The footsteps retreated, but they both knew it was temporary reprieve. They'll wait until we leave, he said grimly. Open country. No witnesses. Eliza made a decision. Then we don't run. She stood, ignoring her painful feet. I'm tired of running. Before he could stop her, she limped to the main room. The drunk from earlier sat with two companions, planning their ambush over whiskey. She walked directly to their table. You want me? Her voice carried across the sudden silence. Here I am. The drunk leered. Starting to rise, Thomas appeared behind Eliza, and the man's expression changed as he registered the scout's deadly stillness. But know this, Eliza continued. I'm no man's property. Try to take me, and one of us dies. Maybe all of us. She smiled coldly. I'm a witch, remember? My curses follow men to hell. Perhaps it was her tone, or Thomas's reputation, or simple superstition. The drunk sat back down, suddenly less eager. Just having fun. Ma'am, no harm meant. They retreated to their room, Eliza shaking with delayed reaction. Thomas pulled her close. That was either very brave or very foolish. Both, she admitted. But I won't cower anymore. Won't be prey. He kissed her forehead. My fierce healer. My witch woman. They left in the pre-dawn darkness. Diego having mysteriously found 2 horses. Not good ones, but adequate. The drunk and his friends were nowhere to be seen. As they rode south, the sky lightened to pearl and gold. Behind them lay the trading post and its dangers. Ahead waited unknown territory. 40 miles to the ranch, Thomas said. Then maybe New Mexico. Santa Fe, start fresh. Eliza urged her mount alongside his, their knees touching. What if they won't accept us there either? A mixed couple, both outcasts? Then we keep going. Mexico, maybe. Or California, somewhere big enough for misfits. The sun climbed, already hot. Her feet throbbed, her back ached. Uncertainty clouded every horizon, but Thomas rode beside her, steady as stone. And that was enough. Tell me about Santa Fe, she said, as he described adobe buildings and mountain views. She let his voice carry her forward. Whatever came, they would face it as they had everything else, together, step by painful step, across the vast and pitiless land that might yet become home. The storm struck without warning. One moment the sky was clear azure. The next, black clouds boiled over the mesas like an avalanche. Lightning split the air, thunder following so close it shook the ground beneath their horses. Flash flood! Thomas shouted over the wind. High ground, now! They spurred the horses up a rocky slope as the first fat raindrops struck. Within minutes, the drops became sheets. The dry wash they'd been following transformed into a raging torrent. Brown water carrying branches, rocks, the debris of miles. Their horses struggled on the slick rocks. Eliza's mount stumbled, nearly going down before she hauled its head up. Through the rain, Thomas pointed to an overhang in the cliff face. They fought their way to it, dismounting in knee-deep water that hadn't been there seconds before. The ledge was barely wide enough for them and the horses. They pressed against the rock face, watching walls of water cascade past. Lightning illuminated a landscape transformed. Peaceful arroyos, now deadly rivers. Familiar landmarks erased. The ranch! Eliza had to shout to be heard. Can we still find it? If it's still there. Thomas pulled her against him, sharing warmth as the temperature plummeted. These storms reshape everything. They huddled together as hours passed. The horses stood with heads low, enduring. Eliza dozed fitfully against Thomas's shoulder, waking when thunder cracked too close. His arms never loosened their protective circle. Near dawn, the rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The sun rose on an alien world, new channels carved in red earth. Vegetation flattened, the air sharp with the scent of sage and wet stone. Their trail had vanished, washed away like it never existed. Thomas surveyed the changed landscape with a scout's eye. We're off course, maybe 10 miles, maybe more. They picked their way carefully down the slope, horses sliding on loose mud. At the bottom, Eliza gasped. A body lay tangled in uprooted mesquite, one of the men from the trading post, the drunk's companion. His horse stood nearby, reins caught in thorn bush, sides heaving. Thomas examined the scene grimly. They must have followed us, got caught in the wash. He freed the horse, checking it for injury. This one's sound. We'll take him. Should we bury him? No time. Scavengers will come soon. He helped her mount, and his friends might be looking for him. They rode hard, 3 horses now, pushing south by instinct more than knowledge. The storm had erased landmarks, but Thomas read the sun, the wind patterns, the distant mountain shapes. By afternoon, exhaustion weighed heavy. The horses were stumbling, foam flecking their sides. There! Thomas pointed to a green line in the distance. Cottonwoods, water, maybe the ranch. As they approached, buildings appeared. Not the expected ranch, but ruins. Adobe walls melted by time and weather. Wooden beams collapsed. An abandoned homestead. Dreams died and blown away. They explored carefully. The well still held water, thankfully clear. In what had been the main house, they found shelter from the sun. Old furniture remained. A table, chairs, even a rope bed frame in the corner. Someone left quickly, Eliza observed, noting dishes still on shelves, clothes hanging from pegs. Apache raids, maybe, or just the land one. Thomas filled their water bags. We'll rest here tonight. While he tended the horses, Eliza explored further. In a lean-to behind the house, she discovered treasure, sealed jars of preserves, bags of beans and flour kept dry, even some medical supplies. Whoever fled had expected to return. Look, she called to Thomas, holding up a bottle of laudanum. Still good. They made camp in the main room as sunset painted the ruins gold, using the old stove. Eliza cooked their first hot meal in days, beans seasoned with wild onions, flatbread made from the found flour. It felt like a feast. Whose place was this? She wondered aloud. Thomas had found papers in a desk drawer. Benjamin and Mary Carson. Deed dated 1871. He showed her a photograph. Young couple, hopeful faces, standing before the house when it was new. No record of what happened? Eliza studied the woman's face. Mary Carson had been pretty, with Eliza's same determined chin. Where was she now? Dead? Fled back east? Starting over somewhere else? We could stay, she said suddenly. Fix it up. Make it livable. Thomas looked at her sharply. It's not ours. They're not coming back. It's been years. She walked to the window, looking out at the desert garden gone wild. I'm tired of running. Thomas, tired of having no home. He came to stand behind her, hands on her shoulders. This isn't far enough. People will still come looking. Your past, mine. They'll find us. Then where is far enough? She turned in his arms. Mexico, California, the moon? He had no answer. They stood together as darkness fell, both feeling the weight of their undefined future. That night, they made the rope bed usable with their blankets. It felt strange after so many nights on the ground, almost too soft, too civilized. They lay side by side, not touching, each lost in thought. I killed my first man when I was 17, Thomas said suddenly. Apache warrior, not much older than me. He was stealing army horses. I was supposed to track, not fight, but... He paused. He saw me, charged. It was him or me. Eliza found his hand in the darkness. Did it change you? Everything changed. The officers slapped my back, called me a good soldier. But that night, I dreamed of his face. Still do sometimes. He squeezed her fingers. Violence marks you. Each death takes something you don't get back. John, my husband, he never hit me, Eliza said slowly. But there are other kinds of violence. Words that cut, silences that suffocate, making someone small, day by day, until they barely exist. She drew a shaky breath. When he died, part of me was glad. That's why they called me witch. They could see it in my eyes, the relief. You survived. That's not evil, isn't it? She turned toward him. I could have tried harder, been a better wife. Maybe if I had... Stop. His voice was firm. You didn't kill him. Fever did. And surviving a bad marriage doesn't make you a witch any more than my mixed blood makes me savage. They moved together then, seeking comfort in touch. Their coupling was different this time, less desperate, more tender. An affirmation not just of desire, but of understanding. Two damaged souls recognizing each other in the darkness. Afterward, they talked of lighter things. Thomas told her Comanche stories his mother had shared, tales of coyote and buffalo. Eliza recounted her father's funny sayings, his insistence that education would save her from ordinary life. He was right, she murmured, drowsy now, though probably not how he imagined. Dawn brought decisions. They could push on to find the real ranch, hope for horses and supplies, or try to make this ruin livable, or continue to Santa Fe, that shimmering possibility. As Eliza prepared breakfast from their found supplies, riders appeared on the horizon. Her heart seized, but Thomas remained calm, watching their approach. Mexican vaqueros, he identified. 5 men, not hunting us, driving cattle. The riders approached cautiously, hands near weapons until they saw Eliza. The leader, an older man with silver threading his black hair, touched his hat brim. Buenos dias, señora. Señor. His English was accented but clear. You have trouble? We saw no horses yesterday. Now 3. Thomas answered in Spanish, explaining briefly. Caught in the storm, seeking the Hernandez ranch. The vaquero's face softened. Ah, but Señor Hernandez sold out 2 months past, gone to California. He gestured at the ruins. This was the Carson place, abandoned 3 years now, after Apaches killed them both. Eliza's throat tightened, thinking of the hopeful couple in the photograph. The vaquero continued, but if you seek work, shelter, my patron, Don Sebastian Morales, he sometimes hires skilled people. His hacienda is 1 day south. He looked between them, making calculations. A scout who speaks Spanish, a señora who keeps house, perhaps useful. She's a healer, Thomas said, trained in medicines. The vaquero's eyes sharpened with interest. Una curandera? Then Don Sebastian will certainly want to meet you. His wife suffers from weak lungs. Come, we will guide you. They gathered their possessions quickly. As they prepared to leave, Eliza slipped the Carson photograph into her medicine bag. Someone should remember them. The vaqueros shared food as they rode. Dried beef, tortillas, strong coffee from a battered pot. They were careful not to ask too many questions, recognizing fellow travelers who preferred privacy. By afternoon, the landscape shifted again, greener here, with actual grass instead of just sage. Cattle dotted the hills, fat and content. In the distance, buildings appeared. Not ruins, but a working hacienda, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Don Sebastian is fair, the lead vaquero. Carlos told them, harsh when needed, but just. His grandfather built this place when it was still New Spain. The border moved, but the Morales family remains. As they approached, Eliza saw gardens, orchards, a chapel with a bell tower. Children played in a courtyard while women washed clothes in a stone basin. It looked like permanence, like safety. Don Sebastian Morales was perhaps 50, with keen eyes and calloused hands that spoke of work despite wealth. His wife, Doña Isabel, was younger but fragile. Her breathing labored as she greeted them. Carlos says you are a healer. She addressed Eliza directly, switching to English. I have tried many remedies. I would need to examine you properly, Eliza replied. But often, the desert air itself can help, with the right treatments. And you? Don Sebastian studied Thomas. A scout, army. Former. I know this territory well. The Don nodded slowly. I lose cattle sometimes. Raiders, both Apache and white. A man who could track, prevent losses. They were given a small house at the compound's edge. 2 rooms, actual floors, a garden plot, luxury after their travels. As the sun set on their first night, they sat outside, watching the hacienda settle into evening routines. It's not our own place, Thomas said quietly. We'd be servants. We'd be safe, useful. Eliza took his hand. Maybe that's enough for now. He lifted their joined hands, kissing her knuckles. For now. That night in their new bed, a real bed with a stuffed mattress, they held each other close. Through the window came sounds of normal life, dogs barking, a baby crying, someone playing guitar. It wasn't the life either had imagined, but it was life nonetheless. No more running? Eliza asked against his chest. No more running, he agreed. At least until the wind changes. She knew he was right. The wind would change. It always did. Their pasts would find them, or new troubles would arise. But for tonight, they had walls around them, work for tomorrow, and each other. In the wild uncertainty of the frontier, that was its own kind of miracle. Outside, coyotes called from the hills, their songs carrying across the desert. Inside, the witch woman and the scout held tight to their temporary peace, storing up strength for whatever storms would come. The tracks were fresh, 5 riders moving fast toward Black Mesa, driving stolen cattle ahead of them. Thomas crouched beside the churned earth, reading the story written in dust and broken sage. Behind him, 3 of Don Sebastian's vaqueros waited on horseback, rifles ready. Apache? Carlos asked quietly. No. Shod horses. American saddles. Thomas swung back onto his mount. They're heading for Skeleton Canyon. If we push hard, we can cut them off at Devil's Gate. 2 weeks had passed since their arrival at the hacienda. 2 weeks of something approaching normal life. Eliza tending Doña Isabel and the ranch's medical needs. Thomas earning respect with his tracking skills. But normality, they were learning, was fragile in this borderland. They rode hard across the broken country. Thomas leading them through shortcuts no map showed. The October sun beat down mercilessly. But he'd learned to gauge their pace, resting the horses just enough to maintain speed without killing them. At Devil's Gate, a narrow passage between towering red rocks, they set their ambush. The rustlers would have to pass through. There was no other way to move cattle across this stretch of badlands. No killing unless necessary. Thomas instructed. Don Sebastian wants to know who's organizing these raids. They didn't wait long. Dust rose in the east, followed by the bawling of tired cattle. The rustlers pushed their stolen herd into the narrow passage, clearly exhausted from their flight. Thomas counted 5 men, as the tracks had promised. Rough types, well armed. Now, he whispered. They struck from 3 directions at once, catching the rustlers in a crossfire of warning shots. The cattle panicked, milling in the narrow space, blocking escape. Drop your weapons, Thomas commanded. 4 of the rustlers complied. Seeing they were trapped, the 5th, younger, more desperate, swung his rifle toward Carlos. Thomas's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. The brief fight was over. They tied the wounded man's arm, then secured all 5 for the journey back. One of them, Thomas noticed with grim satisfaction, bore the brand of Fort Grant on his saddle. Military equipment, meaning deserters or thieves who'd robbed soldiers. You're making a mistake, the leader growled as they headed back. You don't know who you're crossing. Enlighten me, Thomas suggested. The man spat tobacco juice but said nothing more. They reached the hacienda after dark. Prisoners secured in the storage building that served as a temporary jail. Don Sebastian would question them tomorrow, then turn them over to the authorities, if any could be found in this lawless stretch. Thomas found Eliza in their small house, grinding herbs by lamplight. She looked up as he entered, reading exhaustion in his dusty face. Successful? 5 rustlers, 40 head of cattle recovered. He accepted the cup of water she offered gratefully. One wounded, not badly. She moved behind him, hands finding the knots in his shoulders. You're getting a reputation. Carlos says the other ranchers are asking about you. That worries me. He caught her hands, pulling her around to face him. Too much attention invites questions about our past. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding. He studied her face in the lamplight. These 2 weeks had been good for her. Regular meals, useful work, and relative safety had eased the haunted look from her eyes. She'd even made friends among the women, her healing skills overcoming initial suspicion about the gringa with the Indian lover. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we build something here instead of just existing. She gestured around their small home. Don Sebastian offered to sell us land, a small parcel near the eastern spring. We could raise horses, maybe some cattle. I could grow medicinal herbs to sell. With what money? I've been treating people from neighboring ranches. They pay well. She showed him a small leather pouch, heavy with coins. And you've earned Don Sebastian's bonuses for recovered cattle. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with hope and habitual caution. Our own place, no more running, no more running. She agreed. They made love that night with a different energy, not the desperate coupling of fugitives, but something calmer, tinged with possibility. Afterward, they lay entwined, planning in whispers. How many acres they could afford, where to build, what to plant first. The dream lasted until dawn. Thomas woke to pounding on their door. Carlos's urgent voice. Riders coming, many riders. He dressed quickly, strapping on his guns. Outside, the hacienda was stirring to alarm. Armed men took positions on walls and rooftops. Don Sebastian stood in the courtyard, field glasses trained on the dust cloud approaching from the north. 20 riders, maybe more, he announced. Coming fast. Thomas climbed to the bell tower for a better view. Through his own glasses, he could make out details that made his blood run cold. Blue uniforms, army cavalry, riding with purpose. He found Eliza helping move women and children to the chapel, the safest building in case of attack. It's the army, he told her quietly. This might be about me. Her face paled, but her voice stayed steady. Then we face it together. The cavalry thundered into the courtyard. Their lieutenant, young, trying to look harder than his years, dismounting with crisp authority. Thomas recognized him from Fort Grant. Lieutenant Morrison, the captain's son. Don Sebastian. The lieutenant addressed the ranch owner. We're pursuing escaped prisoners, 5 men who murdered 2 soldiers and stole army supplies. We have reason to believe they came this way. Don Sebastian's face revealed nothing. We captured 5 rustlers yesterday. They are secured, awaiting transport to the authorities. I'll need to see them. Morrison's eyes swept the gathered crowd, stopping on Thomas. Recognition flared. Red Hawk? Thomas Red Hawk? Thomas stepped forward. Lieutenant, we heard you were dead. Killed pursuing deserters near the Colorado border. Reports were exaggerated. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Were they? Because a woman matching the description of one Eliza Hartley was reportedly seen with a native scout heading south. There are questions about deaths near her cabin. 5 men, including 3 army deserters. Self-defense. Thomas said simply. They attacked us. That's for a court to decide. Morrison's hand rested on his sidearm. You'll need to come with us, both of you. The courtyard tensed. Don Sebastian's men shifted slightly, hands near weapons. The soldiers responded in kind. Violence balanced on a knife's edge. Then Eliza stepped between them. Lieutenant Morrison. Her voice carried clearly. Your mother suffered from lung complaints, didn't she? I remember your father mentioning it when he bought medicines from me. The young officer blinked, thrown off guard. Yes. I helped her once, sent remedies through your father. She moved closer, away from the protective circle of vaqueros. She wrote me a kind note, thanking me. I still have it. Lieutenant, one of the sergeants, older and weather-beaten, spoke up. This the woman who saved the Brennan young'uns? And the Carter boy when he had the fever. Among others, Eliza said quietly. The sergeant looked at his lieutenant meaningfully. My sister's boys, those Brennan children, they're alive because of her medicines. Morrison struggled visibly between duty and growing uncertainty. There are still questions about men who deserved killing. Don Sebastian interrupted smoothly. Men who attacked travelers, murdered families. If Senor Redhawk defended himself and this lady, he did what any man would do. That's not... Additionally, Don Sebastian continued, they are under my protection now, my employees, and I have some influence with the territorial governor. His smile was razor thin. Perhaps you would like to question the prisoners you came for, take them back for army justice. That would be a successful mission. No, the lieutenant recognized the offered compromise. Take the current prisoners, leave without bloodshed. Avoid a political incident with a powerful landowner. Show me these rustlers, he said finally. An hour later, the cavalry departed with their 5 prisoners, who were indeed the murders they sought. Morrison paused before mounting. This isn't over, he told Thomas quietly. There are still questions. There always are, Thomas replied. As the dust settled behind the departing soldiers, Eliza sagged against him. Around them, the hacienda slowly returned to normal, weapons disappearing, children emerging from the chapel, ordinary life resuming its rhythm. Don Sebastian approached them. That was close. Too close, Thomas agreed. We've brought trouble to your door. We should leave. Nonsense. The older man's voice was firm. You've earned your place here, but perhaps a bit more distance would be wise. That eastern parcel we discussed. It's yours if you want it. Far enough for privacy. Close enough for protection. Eliza gripped Thomas's hand. How much? Don Sebastian named a price. Fair, even generous. Build something lasting, he said. This territory needs people who stand their ground. That night, they walked out to see their land by moonlight. 40 acres of desert and possibility, with a spring and cottonwoods, good grazing, and a rise perfect for a house. To the east, Black Mesa loomed like a guardian. To the west, they could see the hacienda's lights, close enough for comfort. It's beautiful, Eliza breathed. It's hard country, unforgiving. So are we. She turned in his arms. Thomas, I know the risks. The army might come back. My past might catch up. Yours too, but I'm tired of letting fear choose our path. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then we build, but carefully, quietly, like desert plants, she agreed. Deep roots first, then growth. They stood together on their own land. 2 outcasts who'd found each other across impossible odds. The coyotes sang from the mesa. Stars wheeled overhead, and the desert waited to see what they would make of this chance. In the distance, a nighthawk called, its cry both mournful and fierce. Eliza thought of the Carsons, who'd tried and failed on their land, of all the dreams the desert had swallowed, but she and Thomas were different, tempered by loss, strengthened by survival, bound by something deeper than mere love. Home, she said, testing the word. Home, he agreed, and in the darkness, she could hear his smile. They walked back to the hacienda hand in hand, already planning. A small house first, built of adobe and hope, corrals for horses, gardens for herbs and vegetables, a life constructed day by day, stone by stone, on the edge of forever. The wind from Black Mesa carried the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere out there, their pasts waited like patient predators. But tonight, the future was theirs to shape, and that was enough to build on. Tomorrow, they would begin. They descended Black Mesa as the sun climbed toward noon, their horses picking carefully through loose shale and thorny ocotillo. Thomas led, reading the treacherous paths with an instinct born of survival, while Eliza followed, her mount's saddlebags heavy with herbs gathered from the sacred slopes. 3 months had passed since they'd claimed their land. 3 months of back-breaking work, building their adobe home, digging irrigation channels, planting the first crops. The small house stood complete now, its thick walls a fortress against summer heat and winter cold. But today they'd climbed the mesa seeking something more than shelter. There, Thomas pointed to a faint trail winding down through red rocks. Easier for the horses. As they descended, Eliza noticed the change in him, how naturally he moved through this ancient landscape, as if the months of settled life had finally allowed his true nature to emerge. He was teaching her the old ways his mother had shown him, which plants healed, which roots held water, how to read weather in cloud shapes and wind patterns. A sharp crack split the air. Rock exploded near Eliza's head as Thomas yanked her from the saddle, pulling her behind a boulder. More shots followed. Lead whining off stone. "Stay down," he hissed, already moving. She pressed against the rock, heart hammering. Through a gap, she glimpsed their attackers, 3 men positioned on a ridge above, rifle barrels glinting. Not Apache, white men, hunting them specifically. Thomas had vanished like smoke. She knew he was circling, using skills learned in a dozen campaigns, but 3 against 1, with her pinned down. She checked the revolver at her hip. Loaded. Ready. John's old gun had become as much a part of her as her medicine bag. The frontier had taught hard lessons about being helpless. A scream echoed off the canyon walls. One attacker tumbled from his perch, Thomas's knife in his back. The others swung their rifles wildly, searching for the invisible threat. "Eliza Hartley," one shouted, gruff voice, Eastern accent. "There's a bounty on you, witch. Come quiet-like and we won't hurt you much. Bounty hunters." Someone from her past had set a price on her head. She felt sick, then angry. Would they never be free? The second hunter was backing toward higher ground when Thomas materialized behind him. A brief struggle, a sickening crack, and another body fell. The third man panicked, firing wildly before breaking cover. He ran straight toward Eliza's position, not seeing her until too late. Her shot took him center mass. He staggered, shocked, then collapsed almost at her feet. "Damn! Witch!" he gasped, then went still. Thomas appeared, breathing hard, blood on his shirt, not his own. He checked each body with professional efficiency, gathering weapons and searching pockets. "Pinkertons," he said, showing her an agency badge. "Private detectives. Someone paid well to find you." Her hands shook as reaction set in. "Who? Why now?" He pulled papers from the leader's coat. "Wanted notice. Says you poisoned your husband. Practiced dark arts. Corrupted Christian souls." His jaw tightened. "Signed by Reverend Marcus Wallace." "The banker's brother. He took over John's congregation." She laughed bitterly. "Still blaming me for everything wrong in their lives." "There's more." Thomas showed her another paper. "They know about us. About the ranch." These men were heading to Don Sebastian's after checking the old Carson place. They looked at each other, understanding passing wordlessly. Their quiet months were over. If these 3 had found them, others would follow. "We could run again," Eliza said quietly. "No." Thomas's voice was iron. "No more running. This is our land, our home. We make our stand." They stripped the bodies of anything useful, then dragged them to a deep ravine. The desert would claim them as it claimed everything. Bones scattered by coyotes, names forgotten by all but those who'd sent them. The ride home was tense, both watching for more hunters. But they reached their small ranch as afternoon shadows lengthened. Everything peaceful. Their neighbor, Miguel, was fixing a fence post, whistling tunelessly. He waved as they passed. Inside their home, Eliza tended Thomas's minor cuts while he cleaned the captured weapons. 6 rifles now, plus ammunition. If trouble came calling, they'd be ready. "We need to tell Don Sebastian," she said. "Tomorrow, tonight, we plan." But planning was interrupted by hoofbeats, many horses approaching fast. They grabbed rifles, taking positions by windows. Then Eliza recognized the lead rider. "It's Doña Isabel." Don Sebastian's wife rarely left the hacienda, her health too fragile for hard riding. But here she was, accompanied by 6 vaqueros, her face urgent with purpose. "Forgive the intrusion," she said as Eliza helped her inside. "But news travels fast in the desert. The Pinkerton agents, they stopped at the hacienda first, asking questions. My husband sent them away, but—" "We encountered them," Thomas said simply. Isabel's eyes sharpened. "Ah, and they won't be reporting back?" "No." "Good." The aristocratic woman smiled coldly. "My husband is too honorable sometimes, but I grew up on the frontier. I know necessity." She pulled out a leather portfolio. "Which is why I bring these." Inside were documents, marriage certificate, land deeds, citizenship papers, all perfectly legal, all under different names. Thomas Reed and Elizabeth Reed, married in Santa Fe, property owners in good standing. "How?" Eliza breathed. "I have cousins in government, favors owed." Isabel waved dismissively. "Your pasts are your business. But going forward, you are the Reeds, respectable ranchers. No one can prove otherwise." "Why help us?" Thomas asked bluntly. "Because you saved my life." Isabel touched Eliza's hand. "Your treatments gave me months I wouldn't have had, because you've proven yourselves valuable to our community. And because—" her voice hardened, "I despise men who hunt women for profit." After they left, Thomas and Eliza sat in their kitchen, staring at their new identities. Elizabeth and Thomas Reed. Simple names for a complex reality. Can we be those people? Eliza wondered. We can be whoever we need to be. He pulled her close. But underneath, we're still us, still the witch and the scout who found each other. That night, they made love with fierce intensity, as if trying to mark each other too deeply for any paper to erase. Outside, wind rattled the shutters, carrying the wild scent of creosote and rain. Later, unable to sleep, Eliza walked out to tend her garden by moonlight. The herbs grew well here: sage, chamomile, feverfew, and others. Plants Thomas had shown her, bearing names in languages she was learning. Medicine plants, power plants, his mother would have called them. She heard him come up behind her, felt his arms encircle her waist. Can't sleep? Thinking. She leaned back against it, warmth. About those men. I killed one. Thomas. Shot him dead. And I don't feel guilty. What kind of person does that make me? A survivor. His voice held no judgment. The frontier strips away pretense, shows us who we really are underneath civilization's rules. And who am I? A healer who can also protect herself. A woman who chooses her own path. My wife, in truth, if not law. The Reed's law now? She corrected with dark humor. They stood together in the garden, surrounded by growing things and the vast desert night. In the distance, a great horned owl called, hunting under stars. They'll send more, she said eventually. Wallace won't give up. Neither will the army if they decide you're worth pursuing. Then we'll face them. Here, on ground we choose. He turned her to face him. I'm done being hunted. Eliza, done letting others dictate our lives. If they want to fight, they'll get one. The determination in his voice matched her own growing resolve. They'd tried running, tried hiding. Neither had worked. Perhaps it was time for a different strategy. We need allies, she said. Beyond Don Sebastian. The Apache. She looked at him sharply. Your mother's people. Some still remember her. Remember me as a boy, before the army took me. His face was unreadable in moonlight. They have no love for bounty hunters or soldiers. Might be willing to help for the right reasons. What reasons? Medicine, trade, mutual benefit. He paused. And because I'm tired of being neither white nor Indian. Time to choose a side or make our own. The next days passed in preparation. Thomas rode out alone, returning with news of careful negotiations. Apache scouts would watch the approaches to their ranch, warning of strangers. In exchange, Eliza would treat their sick. No questions asked. She met them first at a prearranged spot, 3 women with children, 1 elderly man with infected wounds. They watched her with suspicious eyes until she spoke a greeting Thomas had taught her, clumsy but sincere. The oldest woman almost smiled. As she worked, cleaning wounds and dispensing medicines. She felt the weight of their history. These people had every reason to hate her kind. Yet here they were, driven by the same desperation that had once driven her, the need to survive in a world that named them enemy. "You learn," the old woman said in broken English as Eliza stitched carefully. "Good. Maybe you live long enough to learn more." It was as close to acceptance as she'd get, and more than she'd dared hope for. The season turned. October bleeding into November. Their first crop came in, small but sufficient. The house grew more comfortable with each improvement. On clear nights, they sat outside, planning expansion, more horses, maybe sheep, a larger garden, but always, they kept weapons close. Always, they watched the horizons. The attack came on a cold morning when frost silvered the sage. Not bounty hunters this time. Wallace himself, backed by 20 hired guns. They surrounded the house before dawn, confident in numbers. "Eliza Hartley," Wallace's voice boomed across the stillness. "By the authority vested in me as a duly appointed territorial marshal, I order you to surrender." Thomas checked his rifle. Territorial marshal? That's new. Must have bought the appointment. Eliza felt oddly calm. How very like him. They'd prepared for this. Windows barricaded, ammunition stacked, water barrels filled. What Wallace didn't know was that they weren't alone. The first shots came from the mesa, Apache rifles finding targets among Wallace's men. Chaos erupted as the hunters became hunted, attacked from angles they hadn't expected. Thomas and Eliza held the house, picking off anyone who approached. She'd become a decent shot these months, steady and methodical. When Wallace himself tried to rush the door, her bullet took his hat off, sending him diving for cover. "Damn it, witch! You're only making it worse. Worse than being burned alive?" she called back. "I'll take my chances." The battle raged through morning into afternoon. Wallace lost men steadily, picked off by unseen Apache marksmen or Thomas's deadly accuracy. By the time Don Sebastian arrived with his vaqueros, responding to the gunfire, Wallace's force was broken. "Enough!" Don Sebastian's voice cut through the shooting. "This is my land you're bloodying. Wallace, take your remaining men and go, or face me as well." Trapped between the house, the Apache, and now fresh vaqueros, Wallace had no choice. He gathered his wounded and fled, but not before shouting a final threat. "This isn't over, witch. You'll hang for your crimes." As the dust settled, Thomas surveyed the battlefield. 8 dead attackers, more wounded. Their house bore scars, bullet holes, a window shattered, but it stood. The Apache melted away as quietly as they'd come, their debt paid. Don Sebastian left men to help clean up, promising to speak to the territorial governor about Wallace's abuse of authority. That night, Eliza stood in her damaged garden, replanting herbs torn up by the battle. Thomas joined her, dirt under his nails from burying bodies. "We won," he said quietly. "For now." She pressed seedlings into earth. "He'll be back, or others like him. Then we'll win again." She looked at him, this man who'd chosen her above easier paths, who'd killed for her, built a home with her. "I love you," she said simply. "In case I don't say it enough. You say it every day, in how you look at me, how you trust me." He kissed her gently. "How you stand beside me when the world comes calling." They finished planting as stars emerged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, repairs to make, allies to thank, future attacks to plan for. But tonight, they were home, together, alive. The witch and the scout, the reeds, whoever they needed to be to survive in this hard, beautiful land that tested souls and occasionally, against all odds, let love take root in the most unlikely ground. The blood trail led through ironwood and cholla, dark spatters on red sand that told their own grim story. Thomas moved carefully, rifle ready, reading signs invisible to most. Behind him, Carlos and 2 other vaqueros followed, equally alert. "He's hurt bad," Thomas said quietly, "but dangerous. Wounded men do desperate things." Wallace had escaped the battle 3 days ago, vanishing into the desert while his hired guns died or fled. But he'd taken a bullet, Eliza's shot had found its mark, though not fatally. Now they tracked him like a rabid animal that needed putting down. The trail led to an abandoned mine shaft, one of dozens that dotted these hills where men had once sought silver and found only death. Thomas smelled it before he saw it. Blood, sweat, and something else. Sickness, infection. "Senor Wallace," Carlos called out. "Surrender! Don Sebastian guarantees fair treatment." A shot rang out from the mine's darkness, wild and unfocused. Wallace was still alive, still fighting. "Go away!" the voice echoed from below, raw with pain and fury. "That witch! She's corrupted you all! Devil's whore!" Thomas handed his rifle to Carlos. "I'm going down. That's Loco, amigo. He's dying. Gut shot, infected. Give me an hour." He checked his pistol, took a torch. "If I'm not back, seal the mine." The shaft descended at an angle, timbers groaning overhead. 20 feet down, it opened into a small chamber where miners had followed a vein of nothing. Wallace huddled against the far wall, pistol wavering in his hand. He looked like death, face gray, shirt soaked with blood, and worse, the wound had gone bad, filling the air with the sweet stench of rot. "Come to finish it, Breed?" Wallace's laugh became a cough. "Should have known she'd send her tame Indian. Nobody sent me." Thomas kept his hands visible, non-threatening. "You're dying. Wallace, let me help. Help!" The man's eyes blazed with fever. "Like you helped those men you butchered? Like she helped her husband into the grave? Your brother was a hard man who hid behind scripture. Eliza survived him. That's not witchcraft. That's strength." Wallace tried to raise his pistol, but his hand shook too badly. She turned him from God, corrupted his pure soul with her feminine wiles and devil's knowledge. Thomas studied the dying man with something approaching pity. "You really believe that, even now, bleeding out in the dark, you can't see the truth?" "What truth?" "That you're dying for nothing, for pride and prejudice and your own twisted faith." Thomas moved closer. "Eliza saves lives, has saved dozens since coming here. What have you done besides spread hate?" "I uphold righteousness." Wallace's voice grew weaker. "You uphold fear, but it's ending here." Thomas knelt beside the man. "I can ease your passing, or you can die slow, alone in the dark. Choose." Wallace's defiance crumbled. Pain and terror replaced righteous fury. I don't want to die. Too late for that. But you don't have to die hard." In the end, Wallace accepted the laudanum Thomas offered, drinking deep from the flask. As the drug took hold, his rigid features softened. "Tell her," he whispered. "Tell the witch." But whatever message he meant to send died with him. There in the darkness he'd chosen. Thomas emerged into desert sunlight, blinking away the mine's shadows. Carlos raised an eyebrow. "Dead, peacefully, at the end." Thomas reclaimed his rifle. "Seal it. Let the mountain have him." They used dynamite from the mining supplies, bringing down the entrance in a cascade of rock. Wallace would rest forever in his tomb of hatred and stone. The ride back was quiet. As they neared the ranch, Thomas saw smoke rising from the chimney, heard the ring of hammer on anvil, Eliza working in her new smithy, learning to shoe horses and repair tools, self-sufficiency in all things. She'd said, "Never be helpless again." She looked up as they approached, reading the answer in their faces. No words were needed. Wallace was gone. The last real threat to their peace. There would always be dangers in this hard land. But the personal vendetta that had driven them from Colorado was finished. That night, they sat on their porch watching sunset paint the mountains purple. The desert sprawled endlessly, beautiful and terrible, asking nothing but strength from those who'd claim it. "I've been thinking," Eliza said, "about the school Don Sebastian wants to build. They'll need a teacher." Thomas looked at her in surprise. "You? I can read, write, figure, know herbs and healing, some Spanish, even a bit of Apache now." She smiled. "Might as well corrupt young minds properly." He laughed, a rare sound, precious for its rarity. The witch becomes a schoolmarm. There's irony. The widow Reed, she corrected. Respectable educator? Though I'll still be healing folks and growing my herbs. And I'll keep scouting, training Don Sebastian's men. He pulled her close. But always coming home to you. Home. She tasted the word like wine. Never thought I'd have one again. Winter came gentle that year, bringing needed rain without killing frost. Their garden prospered. The small herd of horses Thomas had started breeding showed promise. Neighbors who'd once eyed them suspiciously now waved in passing, brought preserves and gossip, asked for remedies and advice. The old woman from the Apache band came monthly, trading herbs and knowledge. She and Eliza would sit for hours, communicating in gestures and broken phrases, sharing wisdom that transcended language. You learn good, the woman said one day, examining Eliza's dried medicine bundles. Not just plants, spirit, understanding. She touched Eliza's chest. Here and here, her belly. Life grows where death once lived. It took Eliza a moment to understand. Then her hand flew to her stomach, wonder dawning. Are you certain? The old woman's smile deepened every line in her weathered face. I know. Spring baby, strong like father, wise like mother. Bridge between worlds. That night, Eliza waited until she and Thomas lay beneath their quilts, his arm warm around her shoulders. I have news, she said softly. He tensed, instantly alert. Trouble? No, the opposite. She guided his hand to her still flat belly. Life, Thomas, we made life. The silence stretched so long she feared she'd misread him, that this wasn't welcome news. Then his hand trembled against her skin. A child, our child. Yes. He pulled her tight against him, face buried in her hair. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I never thought, never dared hope. Nor I, but here we are. She turned in his arms. Are you happy? Happy. He kissed her deeply. I'm terrified, amazed, grateful beyond words. Another kiss. How did we come to this? The witch and the scout, building life from ashes. Maybe that's what we were meant to do all along. Take the broken pieces and make something new. Spring came in glory. Desert marigolds and lupines carpeting the hills, the dry washes running with snowmelt. Eliza grew round and content, teaching the ranch children their letters while her own child quickened within her. Thomas expanded their house, adding rooms for the future. He worked with focused intensity, as if he could build walls strong enough to protect against all harm. The birth came with summer lightning. The sky split by thunder as their daughter entered the world. Doña Isabel attended, along with the Apache woman and 2 Mexican midwives. A convergence of cultures around new life. She's perfect, Eliza whispered, exhausted but radiant, the baby at her breast. Thomas sat beside them, one finger gently touching his daughter's tiny fist. What do we name her? Sarah, Eliza decided, for your mother, and Hope, for what she represents. Sarah Hope Reed. He smiled. Born free. The seasons turned, as they always had. Sarah grew strong and wild, toddling after her father, learning plants from her mother. The ranch prospered. The school thrived. Former enemies became neighbors, if not friends. Sometimes Eliza stood in her garden at dusk, remembering the frightened widow who'd lived alone at the forest's edge. That woman seemed a stranger now, someone from a different life, a different world. Mama, look, Sarah called, holding up a perfect hawk feather. Pretty, beautiful, sweet girl. Come, let's show Papa. They found Thomas by the corral, working with a young stallion. He swung Sarah up on his shoulders, listening gravely to her chatter about the feather and the hawk and the rabbit she'd seen. This was their life now, ordinary moments made precious by the journey that brought them here. The witch and the scout had become simply Eliza and Thomas, parents and partners, building something lasting in the desert they'd claimed through blood and will and love. As stars emerged over Black Mesa, they walked back to their house, their home, together. Inside. Lamplight beckoned, warm and golden. The scent of sage and supper drifted on the evening air. "Story, Papa?" Sarah asked sleepily. "Which one tonight, little bird?" "The one about the witch and the scout." Thomas caught Eliza's eye, smiling. "That's a long story. Are you sure?" "Please." So as night settled over the desert, Thomas began the tale, carefully edited for young ears, of two lost souls who found each other against all odds, who fought for their freedom and won, who built a life from nothing but determination and love. Outside, coyotes sang their ancient songs. Inside, the Reed family was safe, together. Home. It was enough. It was everything. The witch had found her power not in curses, but in healing. The scout had found his trail not in tracking, but in staying. And in the vast, unforgiving desert, they'd carved out their own small paradise, defended by will, blessed by hope, and sealed with the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. Some stories end with death, others with departure, but the best stories, the ones worth telling again and again, end with beginning, with seeds planted in hard ground that somehow, impossibly, grow into gardens. This was such a story. And in the telling, it became truth. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying these tales from the frontier. Drop a comment below and let me know what corner of the world you're in. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more stories of romance, adventure, and survival in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Eliza and Thomas's journey in the comments. What touched your heart the most? Until next time, partners.